Number 1. The Brat. When I was growing up, my aunts and uncles would move around a lot, though they would be in the same general area. But we would often visit them at new houses all the time. My favorite, though, was whenever they would get out of town and have a place in the country. My parents were native to the area, but had moved away to the city when they got married. So being able to get out in the country and do more stuff was always really fun for me. One thing I did hate, however, was that a lot of my younger cousins could be brats, and there was none brattier than my young cousin Brad. He would misbehave a lot, and his father usually laughed when he did. So of course, this only reinforced Brad's bratty behavior. And although there was a significant difference in our ages, he would always tag along with us older kids when we went out to do anything. Once, when visiting my aunt in a new house in the country, me and a couple of the older cousins decided to go for a walk. I remember taking a BB gun with us, but I don't remember why. And of course, when we went, Brad had to come along with us. He was aggravating as usual. Also, he kept on trying to get us to let him use the BB gun, but he was too young for that at the time. He was also very energetic and wouldn't shut up and kept running up ahead of us. Sometimes he would pick up rocks off the gravel road that we were walking on and throw them at us. The kid was very irritating. Just when I thought that the kid couldn't get any more annoying, he did something really stupid. There weren't many houses along that road. One that we came across, though, was a large 2-story home that was down a long driveway. I didn't know this at the time, but the man who lived there was very much a hermit. The only time anyone ever saw him was when he was outside mowing his lawn. Otherwise, people mostly avoided him, and the very few stories that were told about him were that he was very, very grumpy. Well, Brad just decided that he was going to be extremely annoying and began walking up the driveway. His brother told him to cut it out and get back over by us. However, giving him attention for what he was doing was probably the worst thing we could do. Brad kept taunting us, daring us to come into the old man's lawn to catch him. We didn't take the bait, though, and kept telling him to get his butt out of there. Definitely to defy us, Brad just kept up what he was doing, and then, finally, he turned away from us and began running up the yard. He kept stopping and looking back at us, as if he was daring us to come and get him out of the yard. We still didn't take the bait, though, and he was beginning to realize that we weren't coming in the yard to get him, so he decided that he was going to take it even further. Brad ran up to the house and up to the front steps of the porch. My cousin, whose name was Dan, was now freaking out. He kept yelling at his younger brother to get back over to us, but the kid kept taunting us. I even watched Brad jerk forward, as if he was going to run up and grab his brother, but stopped himself from doing that. I guess we weren't surprised when we noticed the front door of the house opening up. Brad seemed to be too busy taunting us to notice it himself, but he sure noticed, and we were sure surprised when the older man who came out of the house grabbed him by the arm. Brad began screaming for help and jumping around like a maniac, demanding the guy let go of him. We thought at first that the old man would just throw him off the porch, or walk him out to the road where we were. Both Dan and I were totally shocked, however, when the old man opened up the door and dragged Brad into his house. We had no idea if the man had seen us at the end of the driveway. If he had, he didn't seem to care, or he wouldn't have done that. I was about to begin running back to my aunt's house. I thought it made the most sense to get some parents involved in this. Dan, however, had a different idea. He began running up to the house. I eventually followed him, thinking he was just going to make things worse. We got up to the porch, and Brad began banging on the door. There wasn't any answer. although there was no doubt that the man was in the house and that he had to have heard the very loud knocking, but he didn't come to the door. After more than enough time had passed for the man to answer his door, Dan opened up the screen door and tried opening up the front door. However, it was locked and he couldn't get it open. For a few moments we didn't know what to do. Dan, however, decided he was going to keep pounding on the door until the old man eventually answered it. And he was wailing on that door, trying to get the old man's attention. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of pounding on the door, the old man answered the door. He began yelling at Dan for waking him up, although we knew he wasn't asleep. Dan demanded that the man let his brother out of the house. Well, the old man feigned ignorance. He claimed that there was no one in his house other than himself. He yelled at us to get off of his property. That was when Dan did something really stupid. He took the BB gun and pointed at the old man, demanding again to let his brother go. The old man obviously knew it was just a BB gun and told us to get lost before he went and got his own gun, which was a lot more dangerous than what we had. He then slammed the door in our faces. Dan wasn't about to give up. I, however, knew this had gone way too far and needed some adults present, so I told him I was going to run back to our house and get our parents. When the parents all showed up, the old man was still denying he had Brad in his house, but Brad's dad at that point didn't care. He tore open the door and pushed the man out of his way. He began yelling for Brad. Eventually, he heard the kid yelling from the basement of the house, and he went down there to retrieve him. Knowing Brad's dad, I'm surprised he didn't beat the crap out of the old man. I mean, yeah, Brad had been being an enormous jerk. I would be the first one to agree with that. But to lock up a minor kid in your home, and then lie about him being in there, that is just next level crazy. Number 2, cabin. When I was a teenager, I once got lost in the woods. The wooded area around my house was pretty vast. It would have been impossible to ever explore it all on my own. I did try, however, and that was what led me to losing my way. I had been exploring the area past what I normally recognized, but when I tried to backtrack to get out of the woods, I couldn't find it. It didn't take me long to realize that I was lost. I really didn't have any wilderness survivor skills. Hell, I was never even a Boy Scout. I just explored and went where the wind would take me. I also didn't have a compass on me. Not that it would have done any good anyway. I had no idea how to read a compass. Before I knew it, it began getting dark. This really freaked me out because I'd never been out after dark in the woods like that. Plus my parents would have been expecting me home long before that time, and I wasn't happy about worrying them. Even after it got dark, I still tried my best to find my way home. I kept up with this until I got way too sleepy and wasn't making any progress. I knew that I would not be getting home that night, and eventually decided that I had to get some sleep. It was a lot chillier outside that night than it had been in the day, and it was difficult to find somewhere to sleep in the dark. But I found a somewhat comfortable area and did my best to get some rest. I would need it in the morning when I tried to find my way out again. Oh, I slept horribly. I have since had a lot more respect for homeless people than I had before. I almost didn't think that I'd fallen asleep at all, because I don't remember having any dreams. I was exhausted when the sun came up, but I knew I had to get up and try to find my way back out while there was still light. During the second day, I wasn't making any significant progress. I hadn't really been scared up until that point, but by then, I was sure that my parents would have contacted the authorities and that there would be some sort of search for me. I was hoping to get home on my own, but of course being found would make me happy too. Eventually I saw something up ahead of me in the woods. It wasn't until I got really close up to it that I realized it was a really old cabin. It must have been abandoned a long time before, and the vegetation grew up over it. It had been getting close to dark again, and I figured that it would be much more pleasant to sleep there than out in the forest again. There were things inside the cabin that made me think that it wasn't completely abandoned. Although the walls and such all looked like they had been weathered down, there was a bed, and a desk, and a chair that, although they didn't look new, they did not look as old and as bad as the cabin did. But despite that, it was still out in the middle of nowhere, so I couldn't imagine anyone would actually be living there. Still, I went over to the desk, and I noticed a notebook. Interested, I began flipping through the notebook. It was the sickest thing that I had ever seen in my life. There were rantings against certain people and descriptions of how the writer wanted to kill them and what he would do with their dead bodies. There was also drawings of these things he wanted to do, and they were very disturbed. The notebook wasn't very old either, and I finally figured that someone was living in the cabin and that I should get out of it as soon as I could. I went to the front door, but out of the window in the door, I saw a man out there in the woods, walking towards the cabin. I felt my heart jump in my chest. If this was the guy who'd been writing the notebook, I wanted nothing to do with him. Plus, I could only imagine what he would do to me if he caught me in his cabin. The cabin did have other rooms. I ran into one, which I assumed was supposed to be a kitchen because it had a table and an old stove in it. Fortunately, there was a back door in it too, and I went to open it and get out. Now, if I had been in a horror movie, it would have been hard to open, but I wasn't, so it opened easily and I slipped out of the house. I still had to be really careful because there were windows in the cabin, and I didn't want the guy to see me creeping away from the cabin, so I waited until it got darker out before I left, and I walked slowly and kept ducking behind trees. If the guy had seen me, he didn't come after me. I didn't find a place to sleep until I was really far away from that cabin. Even then, I slept worse than I had the night before. The following day I was found by a search party. It was such a relief as I was tired and hurting and dehydrated. I had told them what I'd seen, but they weren't police officers or anything, and didn't see it as a problem like I did. I told my parents too. Basically, they told me that there were sick people in the world, and that was it. I don't know if there were ever any murders in that area, but I often thought of that guy, and if he ever acted on his thoughts. I didn't know about it. Number 3, ball game. I lived out in the country, and I always loved doing things out there. When I was growing up, I was raised by one of my aunts. She only had one other boy of her own, Tom, and we did a lot of things together. We had a good relationship and never fought with each other. That might be because we were cousins and not really brothers. We were also about the same age. There were some other kids in the area, down the road. We played with them every now and then, but it was quite a walk to get everyone together. The road and the houses were at the bottom of the hills, so on the other side of the road was an enormous field. We would play things like tag, but one of the things that we played the most was baseball. Of course, we didn't have full teams, so everyone would be playing in the infield, except one person, who was the batter, and anyone else who was on base. If they were out, they would go back to a position in the field. Now, the field really wasn't ideal because it did sometimes have these tall grasses that would grow up in the field. I didn't know what they were called, and it didn't grow too tall, and it didn't get too dense for us to move around in. We were playing baseball pretty late in the day. The sky was beginning to get that dusk look about it. While we were playing and I was in the field, I noticed some guy walking along the road. He was a little ways off from us. I didn't think anything about him at the time, we would occasionally see people walking on the road. The only thing I did take note of was that I had never seen this person before. We pretty much knew all the people that were around us. I kept playing, but I kept looking over at the guy walking on the road. I was curious who he was, or if I would recognize him when he got closer to us. When the guy did get closer, I realized that I didn't know him at all. Not only that, but he stopped walking and began watching us play. Nothing strange about that, I thought at the time. A lot of older people who went for walks would stop and watch us play baseball. It was nice to have an audience. We would keep playing until it got dark. We really loved baseball. It was beginning to get dark. The guy was still watching us as we wrapped up playing. Normally we would walk to the road and then walk along the road to get home. But we didn't want to walk up to that guy, so we all walked down the fields. Everyone lived the opposite direction from my cousin and me, so he and I were walking alone. At first, the guy didn't do anything. He just stood in place. When we were a little further down the field, we finally walked over to the road. When we did, I looked back at the guy and noticed that he began walking in our direction. This did worry me because he had been walking in the opposite direction when I first noticed him. My cousin and I both noticed this, and we were a little worried. My aunt and uncle both worked the second shift, so we would be alone when we got home. We were both 13 at the time and not very big. He followed us all the way home, but when we turned onto our driveway, he did keep walking, so we thought it was just a coincidence, and he hadn't been following us. We forgot about it for a while and made dinner. I even remember that we made a pizza, and we were going to watch a movie. This was back in the late 80s, so we had a VHS player. Yeah, the old days. But when we came in the living room, I thought I noticed something out the front window. I told my cousin, and I instantly thought about that guy who was following us. I thought he might have come back. We put our pizza down and went to check it out. This part will sound weird. Tom and I had an old crossbow that we played around with. I got the crossbow, and he grabbed a flashlight, and we went out the front door. He shined the flashlight around, and we really didn't see anything in the front yard. But when he shined it to the right of him, we saw someone peeking around the side of the house. He immediately bolted behind the house when the light flashed on him. I yelled out that he needed to get off our property, and that I had a loaded crossbow in our hands. We went to the right side of the house and shined the flashlight on the side of the house. We didn't see anyone there, but after a few moments I heard someone on the other side of the house. I turned around before Tom, so I didn't have much light. The porch light was very dim, but I was able to see that there was someone there. He only looked at me for a moment, and I raised the crossbow up, but he ran off again, this time up the driveway. I followed him with the bow, but I didn't shoot at him. He ran off down the road. I have no idea what that guy wanted. After searching the house outside, we noticed some damage on the back doorknob. We figured he was trying to get in that way, but he knew Tom and I were home, so he must have had really bad intentions. Fortunately, we seemed to scare him with the crossbow. Although we wondered about it all, he never came back either. I never saw him walking around either, so we'll never know. Heyo, Killer Orange Cat here. First of all, I want to thank all my paid patrons, starting with my two VIPs, Chiamerah Cat and Pixie Opera 8. I also want to thank Heidi H, Chronic J, Stinky Ooze, EricaOdd, Tracy Sellars, Kelli Clark, and Broken Angel. And I'm very sorry that I keep telling you I'm going to get a strap and I keep not doing it. I had a really mind-boggling month. I've had a lot more videos than I've usually been putting out in a month, and I hope to continue that, have a lot more than I had in May and June, if we can. So, if you have stories, let me know, but I always am good at finding them myself. And I promise I will have something out for you before the end of the month, which is tomorrow, so I'll do something for the patrons. I have something in mind. Anyhow, if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat and you'd like to be, please hit the subscribe button and the bell to be notified of new videos. Leave me a comment, which I'll do my best to get back to, and share the video with someone you think might enjoy it. If you have an original story you want narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address included in the description. And now I'd like to mention all my free Patreon members: Anthony Bowers, Remi, Venikins, Rose Metro, Woofer McWooferson, I love saying that, Cindy Cleveland, Vanapira Rayne, William H., Alien Unicorn 13, Kathryn Lynch, The Bama Guy 334, Michael Vasquez, Bonnie Lynn, Collet Bond, Krista Pike, Prince UVA, HF Creations, Bonnie Gibbs, Linda Moore, DJ Lira, Evil Black Cat, Lori Hicks, Lisa Herman, Krystal Robin, Hillbilly 13, RhettSchall, John Tull, Baby and Baby, Sherry Hubbard, and Vina Waldren. But most importantly, don't forget to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night, everyone.